doubt, anxiety, depression. Faithful Christians are above all that negativity. At least that's the message I heard whenever I'd ask other Christians for help with these things. The underlying message seems to be, if you were a better Christian, maybe you wouldn't be feeling these feelings that Christians shouldn't feel. But when you commit to God, you will still struggle. It's natural, it's normal, and most importantly, it's going to be an important part of your Christian experience. It's true that drawing closer to Christ makes it easier to navigate feelings like doubt, anxiety, and depression. But that journey up to the mountain of the Lord is a lifelong pursuit. And even though we can see our final destination, Christ standing on the summit, sometimes the terrain between us and Him seems insurmountable. Because unfortunately, getting baptized doesn't mean we'll never sin again. And giving our hearts to God doesn't mean they'll never break again. So let's look a little closer at the Bible and see what it has to say about feelings like these, because you're certainly not the only believer to have experienced them. I grew up going to church, and I remember as I started learning more about the Bible and the Christian way of life, it seemed that wherever I had questions, everyone else felt certain. Wherever I felt unsure, everyone else was past that. Doubt was for those who were young in the faith, but once I grew up a little bit, then I'd understand. The faith would just, fall into my lap. And then I grew up, and I still had questions. I felt really guilty for this. I should have it all figured out by now, right? But isn't it amazing just how quickly I forgot about some of my heroes in the faith? Wasn't it doubt that Peter was feeling when he looked around at the storm and started to sink? Of course, this wasn't Peter's most shining moment, but I don't think this story is preserved in the Bible to make us feel condemned for our doubts. It's not Jesus saying, "Can you believe that Peter felt this way? Get a load of this guy." It's God saying, "You're probably going to feel like Peter did at some point in your life. Even then, Jesus won't let you down." On the rare occasion I feel comfortable enough to share some of my anxieties or fears, it's not uncommon to receive responses back that sound like church speak. Jesus tells us not to worry. Let go and let God. Oh, ye of little faith. This always leaves me wondering, are you the bravest person I've ever met in my life? Seriously, it almost seems like some Christians never experience fear, and that makes me feel pretty alone when I do. Even Jesus said, "Can any of you by worrying add 1 hour to your life?" Paul said, "Be anxious for nothing." So the Christian way must be devoid of anxiety. Maybe that does make me less of a Christian. But if this is my mindset, I'm forgetting that Jesus is encouraging His followers who are worried about their lives, their finances, their government, their families, to trust in Him. Paul is speaking to a church who is currently experiencing anxiety, but he's not condemning them for this state. He's teaching them a method of escaping it, which, in this case, happens to be practicing gratitude towards God. Paul wasn't telling them to ignore their anxiety, he was helping them to navigate it. Comments like these are often made with good intentions, and sometimes these sentiments are helpful, but after a while, it can just start to sound a lot like, just ignore the problem and hope it goes away on its own. But God doesn't want us to ignore our problems. He wants us to take an active role in our climb, and ignoring these chasms looks a lot like giving up and turning back. Christianity claims to have the answers. God claims to fill the void we feel at different times and to different degrees. The Bible claims to have just what people need to feel hope during hopeless situations, but that has not always been my experience. I've been a Christian searching for answers, unable to find them. I've reached out to a God who feels distant or even silent at times. I've desperately searched the scriptures for any hint of hope, but couldn't seem to find it. And feeling hopelessness or despair in a place that's constantly talking about hope is truly an awful feeling. And whenever I've felt that way, I've felt absolutely alone in it. For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. Have I forgotten that Paul wrote those words before I was even alive to feel them? I have felt forsaken by God, but have I forgotten that Christ felt that on my behalf as he hung from the cross and expressed the exact same thing? Following Jesus Christ means wrestling with God from time to time. Don't ignore your loved ones when they're going through the wrestling part. Supporting each other as we get better is as much a part of God's plan as it is for us to get better. Even Jesus Christ asked his disciples, his friends, to stay with him while he prayed in Gethsemane. Doubt, anxiety, and depression are nothing to feel guilty about. The leaders of the early church were doubters. The followers of Jesus and the churches planted by the apostles were anxious, and some absolute powerhouses of the faith got depressed. These feelings are like pain receptors in your body that tell you your arm's on fire. It's a message to your brain that something's wrong. Maybe a painful message, but just a message. Doubt can tell you where you have gaps in your understanding. Anxiety can tell you you're overwhelmed and you need support. Depression can tell you your circumstances are unhealthy and motivate you to make a change. But guilt or no guilt, navigating these chasms is a hard thing to do alone. But we were never meant to go through it alone. God wants us to be there for each other every step of the journey. Because it's not just the suffering person who grows through this struggle, but also his loved ones who support him through it. So remember this: if people feel guilty for their doubts, they'll hide them. If no one feels comfortable expressing their anxiousness, they might never get help. And if people feel like less of a Christian because they're depressed, they might remove themselves from their support system entirely. As Paul wrote to the church at Galatia, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Thanks for watching Magnified. If you found our content helpful, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We really appreciate your support.